All right, folks, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Hope you're having a great day. We're here to talk about Atlassian Guard and the ACP-520, whatever all of that is. Always curious to know how folks are doing and where y'all are at. I just got to grab my chat here so I can see your wonderful responses. Sachin, Susan, Sarah, good to see you all. AJ, Scott, welcome. And give me a quick thumbs up or a nod if you can hear me okay. Ooh, are we just naming random states, Scott? Naveen, good to see you. Justin's nodding. Good. I realized as I asked that, Justin, I can't actually see you. Rohit, welcome, my friend. All right, I hope you all have been studying Guard for me. I'll talk a little bit more my lack of experience with Guard, but this was a fun one for me to learn about and trip over quite a bit. What is my fun fact? I need some help, team. What's my fun fact for today? Welcome, Ricardo. All right, folks, we'll give people another moment or two to jump on in. Got about 30 of us. And then we'll get started talking about Guard and continuing our discussions on the 520. There's so many numbers, if I get them mixed up. We're talking about cloud admin certification here. Up until now, we've mostly spoken about what every admin can do, essentially, doing things like tying in, claiming a domain, managing accounts. Guard is a separate app that we'll dig into that gives us more power and tools and controls to manage our instance and everything. So, with that set up, quickly going to go through our orientation slides and then jump into our training. Quick way of introduction, my name is Rob. I've been using Atlassian products since about 2013, and I'm going through each of the Atlassian certifications. Focusing right now on the ACA series. I've got some things going on, and there's a QR code right under my head if you're looking for the ACA 910. But I'll be building out learning courses for those and then repeating that for the ACPs. And we're closing in on the end of our ACP 520. There are only 8 of them. So be on the lookout for an announcement on which ACP is next. By way of interaction, please use the chat. It should be right over there. Ask questions, interact with each other. You'll see me also put in polls, and I'll drop one in right now. And this is just another way for us to interact and kind of see, how everyone feels about something. If I ask a question, how comfortable are you with something? Or how familiar are you with, say, Atlassian Guard? A 1 is not at all. And then a 4 will be like super comfortable. You can explain it very well. So please feel free to just click on those buttons as well. Please subscribe if you haven't to the channel. Weekly recorded videos on this. John, welcome. As well as live streams. Monday, Friday, I'm trying to do an ACP and an ACA, and then throughout the week, I'll do other topics. JSM for complete beginners, for example, is tomorrow. But also, please like the stream. I have started doing content, not entirely full-time, but it's a big part of what I do now. I've transitioned away from that 9 to 5, and I'll be asking for your support to help me keep doing that. The easiest way to do that is hit the like button if you like this. That'll help other people find it and also tells me what you think is interesting and what you want to keep learning more of. So if you push that little thumbs up, it's somewhere down there. I'd really appreciate it. You can also save and share this. There's probably someone else you work with or you talk to who could benefit from this type of knowledge, so please use that share button to share it around. And then this is our first question. How comfortable are you with Guard? And I'm very happy at least 2 someone's clicked very comfortable, because I'm definitely at the 1 or the 2 level, I'll be honest. Hard to hear me. Other folks, are having any audio challenges? I don't want to turn up my gain anymore because it's already pushing my little orange line here. But please let me know if the audio is okay or not. Quick reminder of this Certification. This is the breakdown of Cloud Org Admin. I always remind myself of this because it helps guide my studying. Again, Guard is part of this, which I assume they would stick under advanced features. But we do also have to remember the users and groups and Atlassian organizations. So as you are planning your studying, please make sure you're making time for these other things. Oh, you're good. You're good, Idamar. I just want to make sure other folks can hear me. Miriam, good to see you. Please keep in mind there are these other topics that we have to kind of master and be aware of. And this is also useful if you're closing in on taking your exam. 40% of it's going to be on organizations, 34% on users and groups. If you can nail those, you can probably pass. All right, let's get started with Guard. Atlassian Guard, I actually don't know how old it is. It's fairly recent-ish on the cloud side, but it's really all about organizational security and giving admins a single spot to go. Good morning, Justin R. To kind of handle all your security needs. Talking to folks, the biggest complaint I've heard about it is SSO is gated through Guard. So if you aren't paying for and using Guard, you can't use SSO for Atlassian products, as I understand it. So there are some, I might say, annoyances from the admin side around the product. That said, this is where we set up things like user provisioning, our auth policies, two-step authentication. Again, your one-stop shop for all security. Another thing to remember about Guard is it's a single, you pay per user, but it's across your organization. So if you have pay for Guard for someone, it's across all the products. You don't have to pay for it for Confluence and Jira and Compass and Bitbucket and every individual thing. Oh, good. We have another wonderful three-letter acronym. Identity and Access Management, IAM. This was a new acronym for me right here. Again, conceptually, I understand that these are things we need. Oops, sorry, I went a bit too far. Oh, thank you, Debbie. There's another one. I am sure we are going to get a lot of folks calling out things that drive them nuts about Guard. Here's another one that Debbie's pointing out. Guard has an audit log that just tracks everything. If you aren't paying for it, you can't use it. Each app might have its own audit log, like Confluence has one or Jira. But your security audit log goes through Guard. If you can't see it, you can't use it. So just something to keep in mind. If we decide to start, if we aren't using Guard, there's going to be limitations to what we as admins can or cannot do. I don't know how much that would show up on the exam. You can't see this, why not? But it might be more around just something for us to be aware of. And I kind of get a chuckle around this line. Orgs can use Guard if they require high-level security. You may be screaming at your screen that some of the things we're going to talk about with Guard are not considered high-level. Again, SSO, to me, is considered a table stakes thing, something we should just have. But keep in mind, through the lens of Atlassian products, Guard is the more advanced security stuff. It's where we can do things like policies, and it lets us scale our security more easily. This is what it's designed for. I'm going to unzoom because this is driving me nuts. Can I get rid of that? Maybe that'll help. There we go. Again, it's our central admin for security. It provides a whole bunch of other features that enterprises would need. And that's something else to keep in mind. Smaller orgs may not need all the features of Guard. I'm not going to say smaller orgs don't need Guard, because I think every company can benefit from things like SSO. But keep in mind, when Atlassian built it, they're thinking of the bigger organizations. And that's where if you're evaluating Guard for your company, take a look at everything it has, just to see the feature sets, to see what you truly need. In my mind, we can't really be too secure, but that is something to consider. You're going to have a lot of things happening that, morning Chad, within Guard that maybe you can choose not to need and make a choice to not go get Guard for that reason. User synchronization is another one. It can help automate data sync between systems for users. All right, and all these wonderful features we get. I always think of the two-factor authentication and SSO. Again, these more commonly used and thought of security things that we get. Guard lets us turn those on for Atlassian. Password rules, session lengths, all of these different security practices. So if you're in a more highly regulated environment or require more security, this is definitely where to go. As Debbie mentioned, this detailed audit log is also hidden under. And here's an interesting call out. Jira Service Management specifically will be included here on Premium or Enterprise. I'm calling this out just because Atlassian certifications don't have gotcha questions, but they may ask us something around this random piece of knowledge that's stuffed in the middle of this page. So this is something I'll try to remember and write down in my notes. JSM has a special slot in the audit log for some reason. And if anyone has any ideas why, I don't quite understand why JSM would get a special include. API tokens, this can be another important one depending on how you're integrated. API tokens are typically used to allow systems to talk to each other. And so Guard gives you that one place to go to see all of those tokens and then to revoke them. So get rid of them if you need to. This can be important if you have a lot of admins running around, or important if, like, say, folks leave. It'll help uncover and expose potential weaknesses in your security because you may not know your system is integrated with something else. All right. Wow. Most of us are not comfortable with Guard, and again, that does not surprise me. Justin, it's saying it's specifically for product admin initiated activities. So I'm at a loss, what that means. I'm going to drop another poll because there's a term that just popped up. Do stuff on their own. And the term is shadow IT. I'm curious. Who knows about shadow IT? And that's the unusual behavior. Now, in IT, ideally, you have a centralized group that handles information technology. The challenge we see on the IT side with a lot of cloud products is groups will just go and buy their own IT product, and then you'll just discover 6 months later, oh, hey, someone has started using a system and didn't tell us. This causes problems because now it's not controlled. We don't know how it's been set up. Maybe it's been configured in a way that exposes our company to risk. So Guard can help us detect if someone has added Atlassian applications to our organization. As well as some other features here for analyzing behavior. But this term shadow IT will probably show up in relation to Guard quite a bit because this is what will tell us, hey, Justin went off and installed a brand new Confluence instance and we weren't aware. User provisioning and SSO is the major use case that I hear a lot about. You can't have SSO without Guard. And another shout out, get back here. And another relation to JSM here. Yes, rogue IT of customers can also be forced to use SSO when putting in requests. Better insights, so we get some more analytics on product usage. Okay, great. Threat detection. I'd be curious to learn more specifically about what this does because I haven't personally used it. But again, we're getting these advanced tools that help us at a larger scale figure out what's going on. One other feature that we'll see are these data classification rules. So you can set up levels. Think of it like, public, sensitive, confidential, private, super private. And then around that, you can control data. So you can say, hey, if it's marked as public, it's okay if anyone sees it. But if it's marked as super private, different things happen to control it to make sure only certain people see it. All right, most of us are familiar with Shadow IT, although I would love to see Shadow IT, the superhero. If anyone can jump out there on like a ChatGPT for me, that'd be awesome. And I mentioned billing is different for Atlassian Guard. This is another common area that can be confusing. it's billed to the entire org, and it's separate from everything else. So this is, I guess, good to understand. Users are billed once per billing cycle, so monthly or annually. So you get charged one time, and you're charged per user, regardless of the products they use. So this is kind of the opposite of most other things. Usually it would be like, oh, you're using Confluence, I'll charge you for that, but not Jira. I don't charge you for Jira. Here, I'm paying for Guard for my org. I have 5,000 people. I pay for all 5,000. They use Atlassian once a year or 27 times every second. I pay the same amount for Guard. And there's two tiers. There's Standard, and the thing to know about Standard is it is included with Enterprise for free. So this made me happy when I learned this. If you're on the Enterprise tier, you just get Guard. That to me makes a lot of sense because, again, these enterprise groups tend to need these types of things. But there's also Premium. And Premium is what adds those data classification and then the threat detection. So again, Guard Standard is more about the provisioning, security policies, shadow IT stuff. Guard Premium is around classification and the threat detection. Rohit, I'm not aware of any other than just kind of tripping over someone using, Jira that you didn't set up. I'm not aware of any like automated, hey, someone has gone off and added a Jira instance to your organization. All right, I'll get that poll out of there. I think most of us figured out what shadow IT is at this point. All right, questions, folks. Again, Guard for me is dissimilar to most of the other things just because it's its own product and they've chosen to split it up differently. So please keep dropping your questions. If you like this, hit that little like button. And also, we do have a Discord server where there's a lot of folks asking and answering questions around Guard and other things. So please feel free to join us over here for continued discussion throughout the week. All right, digging into our questions. We can assume on the exam there will be questions around Standard versus Premium, based on what features we have, which one. Morning, T-Sharp. Good to see you. Different methods of controlling access, features to monitor activity, the data classifications, and Guard Detect. I assume Guard Detect doesn't tell me if I'm using Guard. I assume it's something else. We'll find out, though. Now, again, understanding these features is important. Many of us, I imagine, would be working at an organization that either already has Guard or won't use it. But we might be asked, hey, should we get this? What do we need? And that's where this list you should probably write down or at least be familiar with. I wouldn't say memorize all of these, but just understand what's in Standard. And so when you read a question or if you're asked, versus what you get in Premium. And so one way you could think of this is just memorize what's only in Premium: classification, data security, threat detection. Then when you see a question, if any feature that isn't that is mentioned, it's in Standard. And if it's one of those three things, classification, data security, and threat detection, that's in Premium. And again, this reminder that Atlassian Guard Standard is included in Enterprise. User provisioning. This is important, what's an easier way to say this? This is an important topic for managing users across an instance. So depending on your role, you may be an Atlassian admin, you may have more scope within IT. This allows you to tie your IDP, or identity provider, into Guard to automatically handle provisioning. So as someone is added to Azure Active Directory or to Okta or OneLogin, they can be flipped on or off in Guard. There are other ways to do this that aren't through Guard. However, this is Atlassian's built-in way. So this is a good feature to have if you've got Guard. And I like this little sidebar folks have around people setting up their own Atlassian cloud instances. It is possible you'll have different instances set up that you got to go hunt down and then stomp out. This is also important from like a compliance standpoint. Because if someone is offboarded in that IDP, they'll be turned off in Atlassian. So this is something that IT teams are frequently asked to do or asking for. is just automatically deprovisioning. Similarly, we have authentication policies, and this is, how we. I was going to say have a policy to authenticate. This would be like requiring things like two-step verification, password resets, complex passwords, those kind of things. You can have different features turned on or off. Most commonly in my mind, we would have things like just use SSO if you've got an IDP, or two-step verification. I haven't had to type in an Atlassian password in a while, just because the groups I've happened to work with happen to use Guard and have it set up through like an Okta, a Microsoft, that kind of thing. Although you do have the ability to enforce password policies if that's what you're going to use. Session duration is also one. I don't think I've worked anywhere that had this turned on for Atlassian products, but you can say after 4 hours, you're going to just log people out just to make sure they aren't available too long. I'm trying to think where I last saw, what system I last saw this. It's probably an HR system. You've been logged out, please log back in, kind of thing. Now, this is another important call out. You can set up non-billable authentication policies. And I think there's a typo here. None of the Atlassian Guard features apply. Haha. This will basically carve out a group of individuals who Guard won't apply to, and you won't be billed for users in that policy. So just keep in mind, you do have an option to exclude individuals from Guard. I guess I could see a use case where you'd have some people who you would rather not fall under all the security and all those features. Or if you need to save budget and you have some groups, you could argue, hey, they're secure enough, or that's okay. Just in only 14 other instances. Wow. And then some steps to make the authentication policy. Another call out is right here. You can have up to 20 policies for your organization. That seems like a lot to me. Having 20 different authentication policies. John does a session duration of 36 hours. Oh, got it. And that's driven by policies. That's a good call out John has here. Like any tool, Guard should be supporting our policies and what we need. So it sounds like what John is suggesting is their security team came up with this policy of, hey, you got to log out over the weekend. Guard can then help enforce that. So we need to be careful about using the tool instead of a policy. The tool should always drive the policy. And they exclude users based on financial need and licensing. Although I'd be curious, John, how do you determine which users to exclude? Like, would there be, I don't know, someone on the legal team who should always be included versus someone I'll pick on finance who maybe doesn't? Always curious how groups make those distinctions. All right. Now, to have these policies, you have to have a verified domain and be able to claim accounts. So we spoke about this last week, but your org has to have claimed the domain through Atlassian, and you have to be able to claim the user accounts. Also, let people know when you start changing things. I kind of laugh. This feels like a bit of a throwaway, but anytime you change how someone accesses a system, or if you implement a new policy, please let your team know. If you don't do that, you're going to get a lot of complaints. Why can't I log in? Or what is this new two-factor authentication thing? So a little bit of communication and education can save you a ton of headache, especially when you change how people log in. All right, on to SAML and SO. Interesting. I always pronounce it SAML, and I always say SSO instead of SAML. Actually, let me drop in another poll right here. And just curious how people pronounce SAML. Yes, Nuriam, they definitely will. Change management or controlling and educating folks on differences between things is a little, not pet peeve of mine, but something I think we can all do a heck of a lot better. So single sign-on, again, for me is the stereotypical use case for Guard because that's the only place you can use it. And that is a technology that lets you log in one place. For example, you log into your Microsoft One account or whatever they're calling it now. And then because you're logged in there, you can get into Atlassian. Or you log into Google, you can then log in somewhere else. And John, I really appreciate you here sharing your experience with this because again, I am less familiar with Guard and I haven't been on the owning Atlassian IT side of the house in a while. We're all probably very familiar with SSO, even if you don't know what it's doing. But again, it's a technology that lets you click login with Google and boom, you just get in. It can be turned on in the Help Center. So again, Jira Service Management gets a couple of callouts throughout here. But we can't have customers log in. So depending on how you want to set up JSM, you could say, hey, you've got to authenticate with us. I don't think this would work for external customers if you're supporting your product, but for internal ones, it's another way to ensure, hey, yeah, you're allowed to be here. This will shock everyone, but before you turn on SSO, you have to have an identity provider. And this may require, again, depending on your role, working with your IT or security team, like whoever owns your IDP, your identity provider, and then just follow these steps to set up the process. Typically, these are pretty straightforward. You'll just need information from the identity provider. It's usually like some kind of URL or some kind of secret key you just copy and paste between systems. And then once that's turned on, the identity provider will integrate and you'll be able to use SSO. Turning it on, though, you then have to put it into an authentication policy. So again, you get up to 20 policies. You can have it turned on, but if it's not enforced through the policy, nothing will happen, or it won't be used. The next is two-factor authentication. I saw a very amusing story where a man used a hedgehog. He had a pet hedgehog, and that authenticated his phone for him, like the thumbprint reader. It was his personal security hedgehog, so I always think of that when I think of two-step authentication. But that's where you need your phone to give you a code, or you need a YubiKey or something else, some other thing. Typically, it's a bit of hardware. It could also be like your face, something, a password plus something else. That's the second step. Here, they've got to enter a 6-digit code. This one is also familiar, or fairly common rather. Either you'll get it through a text message, you might have an app on your phone that generates these numbers. If you're either really bored or really interested, check out the science on how this works because the math is pretty neat. Either way, you can enforce this so they log in and then it'll say, hey, enter the code we just texted you, or open up your authentication app and type in the code you see. Now, typically, I don't imagine you would do this and SSO. The SSO IDP would enforce this. You know, Chad, it was a cute story, okay? Yeah, I also can't recommend using your pets or animals as an authentication device, just in case they run off or something. But if your IDP will probably also do two-factor authentication, so you wouldn't necessarily need it in Guard as well. All right, quick coffee break for Rob. Also, one way to support me, you'll notice Chad's name is green. He's got a nice little star. He's a channel member. Members get early access to videos and some other neat stuff. And if I meet you, I'll buy you a cup of coffee. Speaking of, I will be going to Team 25 Europe. So if you're going to be there, let me know. I would love to say hi. You'll see me wandering around the exhibition floor, taking interviews and having fun. And I need coffee. John, yes, that would be a very good. One thing I will remind folks is, like with my phone, I can have multiple like fingerprints authenticate. So you could have a backup. I will find that story and I'll go put it in our Discord later, just because I found it to be so amusing. Hedgehog off story. I'll remember what that means. Next thing Guard helps us do is mobile application management, or MAM. MAM. And this is what allows an organization to control your bits of your phone. Depending on your phone, this can work differently. For example, I think it's Google phones, you'll have a separate profile. So it's not like they access everything on the phone, but it helps ensure that the device is up to date or has other requirements met before they can get into Jira or Confluence. Now this call out, it's for those mobile apps. I'm going to drop another kind of leading poll. And it looks like most of us pronounce it S-A, oh, nope, half of us say Sam L. Thank you all for helping me out there. I'm going to drop a quick poll just on the mobile apps. And I have my own thoughts that I'll share in a minute. I don't want to shift anyone. But this will enforce or gate access to the mobile apps based on, certain requirements. Have you updated the OS, for example? Rodney, you did not miss a Sonic story. You missed authenticating with a personal security hedgehog. I'll drop it in Discord. Shivam, that is not a interruption at all. Please feel free to always jump on in. This is recorded on YouTube, and I'll do my best to send out a follow-up email with a link to this. So the same place you're at right now on YouTube is where you'll see this recording later. All the other ACP-520s are also here, and it's a good reminder for me to add something on the screen right here that just saying this is recorded, but never an interruption, my friend. So some examples that we can do, you can't share, save, or backup content. You can't do screenshots. Data encryption, minimum OS. So again, considering our policies, what do we want to allow people to do on their phone in our systems? Excuse me. Data security policies. This is important. I love how they use this. Data exfiltration. That's just a very, very big way of saying downloading data or data getting out. Again, this is important from the security standpoint. You don't necessarily want anyone downloading all of your Confluence. There's sensitive stuff in there. Rodney. So there's two things we got to set up. There's the scope of data, and that's the data coverage, and then turn on rules. And we have spaces in projects or pages and work items throughout a whole product. So we can be a little bit more targeted, just these 5 projects, or we can say, hey, all of Jira, just cover that. Again, depending on your org and your needs, both of these can be useful tools. You can target, say, just the legal space. You can't download stuff. Or you might have an entire instance where you're like, no, all this is important. You can stop people from exporting content. And again, to me, that's the obvious use case. But also you can turn off public links. Now, this can be done at the app level in Confluence, but here through Guard, you can force it across the organization. Same thing for anonymous access, and then app access. So preventing marketplace apps from getting in. This is something I will call out. The term app has replaced the term product. So Jira and Confluence are apps. Apps can also mean things you download from the marketplace, just to confuse us. I got you, Tushar. Next is that whole shadow IT discussion. I'm sure many of us, I forget who mentioned it, Chad or Justin, you had 14 instances you had to go squash. Very common that this happens. People will inadvertently create a new instance and not even realize it. And now all of a sudden you as the admin have to deal with it. Just some risks of shadow IT. Users may sign up and pay for something. You don't have any control over it, and that's the big one from the security standpoint. And and then you have to go chase it down, educate people, don't do it. A lot of this, like many things, is around education, making sure your users know where to go and what to look out for, what not to click on, kind of things. Now, there's this term you're going to see, discovered products. I like how they say this. First off, it doesn't use the term app, but I just like the name. So Guard will monitor for discovered products. And so this is where you're going to get access. Keep in mind that if this is turned on, your org admins will be able to view these as long as they're managed accounts. However, you can't manage accounts in other organizations. So you're going to have to go hunt down the admins for those orgs to figure out what's going on. And this is where a lot of that extra time consumption takes place. So it's not that Guard will stop this from occurring, it's that you can figure out what's happening. Then we've got our API tokens. Again, this allows Atlassian products to integrate with others, typically external applications. You also may have folks writing scripts that access this. If you have a lot of engineers, they tend to go in and build their own tools. And you may have a bunch of API tokens floating around that you can go revoke. So this gives you the one-stop shop to go in and detect these tokens and then to get rid of them. Again, this is something you would see if you're using a lot of apps or if you have a lot of developers cranking out like apps for your company. We briefly mentioned the audit log at the start. There are audit logs within each app. However, Guard gives us a central audit log. And it's everything like who's accessing what kind of things have changed, is there a new project being spun up in Jira, and who is doing what within Jira. Now again, it's keeping track of pretty much everything that happens in the system. But there is one call out. That last bucket, user-created activities, are only available with Enterprise Cloud. So we're seeing a bit of a distinction. Enterprise Cloud products get Guard Standard for free, and they also get this additional extra information. So if you're on Premium, you won't get the user-created activities. You won't see what users are creating or viewing in the log. You'll see the rest of it, though. Okay, folks, we're getting there. Yes, Tushar, a new nomenclature. App refers to any Atlassian product and can also refer to marketplace apps. You will hear me mix this up all the time because I'm used to saying product, and I'm used to saying like add-on for the marketplace. I'll do my best to be specific and describe what I mean because these terms are starting to mush in my head. You also get insights, so think of it like analytics or just tracking how things are being used. I like how there's an active Trello users chart. Like for some reason, Trello gets popped out on its own. Some of the charts are only available with Guard. So active users, all the managed accounts who use the product at least once a month, useful for figuring out, do we need more licenses or can we start to get, revoke some licenses? Users by product. So again, tailoring our license use or the amount of people we're paying for. And then Trello, for some reason, gets its own chart. I'm just chuckling here. Like, isn't Trello an app? Why shouldn't Trello just be in this one right here? And last, we get this data classification. Now, this is in Premium, so we don't get this in Standard, but it lets us classify information. And that information could be a Confluence page, it could be a work item, or a customer request. So any of these three things have a classification. And then depending on the classification, we can control the data differently. Now, you can create additional classifications. So these are just examples or ideas. Typically, you'd work with your legal team or your information security, InfoSec team, excuse me, to set these levels up, depending on what they are. So there's usually a definition within your org on what these terms mean that will then guide you in terms of how do you classify data. And then once you have them, you can enforce policies. So here we have a screenshot. I've got a policy, block public sharing is the name of the policy. And there's a classification level included, and then it's saying, hey, if there's a public link, block it and block anonymous access. So you set up, this is similar to, this is a data point on a piece of information, and then you have a policy that helps enforce what can or cannot be done with it. Justin, I see what you did there, my friend. Justin's making a joke. Work items used to go by a different name. It rhymes with tissue. I'm trying not to say the word out loud anymore. But we've also been replacing that word in real conversation. So that's why they have a real work item with all this. Is a funny joke. I think this is the last bit. Guard Detect. Again, Guard Premium. This is attempting to monitor for suspicious activity. There we go. So it's trying to just keep an eye out for things that are happening in our instance that might suggest nefarious or bad activity. Things like, hey, page crawling, or maybe someone is searching for specific terms quite a bit. That might suggest they're doing something they shouldn't. Different changes in API keys. So it's trying to help us by using technology. Tushar's got it. It's trying to help us actively monitor the system for things that might suggest something bad is happening. It doesn't mean that if it detects something that's guaranteed to be a bad thing. However, if I see someone adding a lot of org admins, I'm going to go start asking questions. Why is this happening? It can also help us proactively find sensitive stuff like private keys or API information. And we can integrate it with Slack. Hooray. But again, this is just the premium version of Guard. So I think of this more like, what were the old school virus scanners that would scan constantly and say, hey, suspicious activity detected. It's that kind of tool to help us see what's going on. All right, folks, what other questions do you have? We are closing in on the end of Guard. Quick reminder, if you like this, please hit the like button. Helps other people find it and is the easiest way to support me. Again, I'm doing this professionally now, which to me is insane. But I really enjoy it, and I really hope you all get a lot out of this. So please look for ways to support me if and when you can. You can push that like button, simplest, quickest way. You can also become a member of the channel. And the QR code right under my head will take you to a new learning platform I'm setting up. And that particular one is the ACA-910. And there's something fun and different about it. If you go check it out, that I'm able to offer. So if you know folks who are using Jira Service Management, that's a great certification for them, that one right there. Okay, back to Guard. Implementing Guard. We can demonstrate how to turn it on and summarize steps to synchronize. Okay, great. Rodney's got a good question. While we're talking about Guard, everyone consider which Pokemon would it be? I'm laughing, Rodney, because I've started watching a lot of Pokemon lately. And most of us most of us think the mobile apps for Atlassian are kind of And that's honestly about where I am. Like, I'll acknowledge that there is a mobile app, and that's about all I need with it. So implementing. First, we have to verify the domain. So this is done in the App Admin Hub, or the Admin Hub. We took a look bit at this last week. And then we have to claim some accounts. Again, we can only use Guard for claimed accounts. And then we need to go to the Security tab and flip this thing on. Well, that seems pretty straightforward. You do get a 30-day free trial, like most things at Atlassian. But then again, you're billed per user. So it's not per app they're using. It's not by how much they use it. If you have a verified user, you're going to get billed for it. You can set up a policy, though, that excludes accounts. So just remember, if you need to exclude folks, you'll exclude them from billing and from all the Guard features. Next, we need to sync users. Now, we've spoken about syncing through an IDP, the identity provider. And that's important because it just feeds in all your users. Typically, your identity provider is your source of truth for who is active at your organization. So you wouldn't be going into Guard to setting up an account. You wouldn't start building the account there necessarily. It would be in the Okta, in the one login in that system. We've got SAML. You can have multiple identity providers. Okay, great. If you have them. SAML is the SSO, and that is, again, typically through the IDP. So you can force people to go through that identity provider to get in. John, yeah. I need to go back and look at it to see if there's been any updates, but even like browsing content in Confluence for me is annoying because some macros don't load, and you just get this weird box. You're like, great. If we're using something like a Karma to make the page look better, it just loads as a box. Completely useless. You can also integrate your user directory, and this is the main reason why we would do this. It's to get all the users into Guard, into Atlassian, and have that handle these accounts. Got to set up these things. So here's an example here. We've got Okta, which is one of the identity providers. You don't have to use Okta. This is just the example. You have to go through and set it up and indicate, hey, which folder, which group in here do we need to push to Atlassian Guard? Again, you might have to work with your IT team, your information security, whoever owns your IDP to go do this. But you'll link them in that security tab, add in your provider, and then you'll have to copy some information between your provider and Guard. And so it usually just looks like a URL and then a bunch of gibberish text that you copy and paste between. And that's what tells the identity provider, hey, you can trust Atlassian. And that's what tells Atlassian, hey, you can go trust this identity provider. One call out here, if you're using multiple identity providers, I don't think I've worked in an environment where there's multiple providers, but you'll have to tell it which one. If users show up in multiple IDPs, you'll have to tell Atlassian which one do I take, just so you don't end up with two shars in there. So you'll have to just give it an idea of which one. Preetha, yes, I'll grab that in just a minute for you. I think this should work. Let me know if that does it for you, Preetha. Ooh. Lots of acronyms. All right, folks. We're in the home stretch here. Quick reminder, we do have a Discord server. You're welcome, Preetha. Please jump in there. This is intended for any topics around Atlassian, not just certifications. But we do have dedicated channels to each of the certifications I've gone through, so you can get help there. And also, we have like a horror stories channel where people share all the crazy things they've seen. And I'll share that story about the personal security hedgehog that some of you may have missed. All right. Before provisioning users and groups, you have to connect Atlassian and IDP to communicate. This makes a lot of sense. IDP is where, again, that's the source of truth for users. So when we turn this on, we're going to be looking at Okta as the source of truth. The service provider is Atlassian Guard, and that's what sits between access to Confluence and the IDP. And then the system for cross-domain identity management, SIM. Let me just drop another poll. How do we... I realize I've used this term, but I've never spoken it. SCIM. How do you pronounce it? As another Q&A. Just the steps to go through. And again, this requires access to both of these systems, or it requires someone who has access to the IDP to give you SCIM information, or SIM, or however we're pronouncing SCIM. You need a URL and a key. And again, that is what the IDP and Atlassian use to trust each other, is the way to think about it. Once that's set up, though, the nifty thing is as people are added to the IDP, they automatically will get access based on how you've set it up. So just as people are hired in, Sarah doesn't pronounce it at all. Awesome. The only thing to do at this point then is to just double check and keep an eye on it. As people are hired in, like typically you'll have large groups of people. Every third Monday, we hire in people. You can always go double check in Atlassian to make sure they're there. Or if someone complains, hey, I didn't get access, you'd have to go first check the IDP. Are they set up properly in that? Within the IDP, you can set up groups, and every organization might do this differently, but a typical setup is you'll have folders or groupings within the IDP for Jira, one for Confluence, one for JSM, or for different orgs. This way, when you remove or add them to those groups in the IDP, they automatically get or are revoked access in Atlassian. So again, the management is done in the IDP once you have the sync set up, and it depends on the IDP and how it is used in terms of what it'll actually look like and feel like. This call out here is basically just saying you could have, in your IDP, you might have a group called support agent. And when someone's added, that will get them access to Jira and Confluence, but also 7 other systems that aren't in Atlassian. So that's the power of using the IDP. It's one spot where you can configure all the access they need. You could, however, just have a group that only does Jira or just JSM if you wanted. And then offboarding folks. Again, because the IDP now controls access, as long as they're disabled in the IDP, they'll be disabled in Atlassian. So it removes the need for an admin to have to go into multiple places and say, oh, Rodney had JSM, turn him off. Rodney's got Jira, turn it off. Rodney's got Confluence, turn it off. Okay, we're done. Instead, you just go to the IDP and say, hey, shut down Rodney's access, and it does. It's usually a good idea to also verify, like just a sanity check, did this work? But it makes it very simple to turn a user off or to turn a user back on. Sometimes groups will do this if someone goes on holiday. You shut down their access for the month they're out, you turn it back on when they come back. Or if someone leaves an organization, they go get a different job and they come back, you can flip them back on and that restores their access. Whew. And that was Atlassian Guard. So far, it looks like the majority of us pronounce it SCIM or SCIM. All right. Wasn't sure what I would get with that poll. So that is Guard. Again, it is intended for larger groups. It comes free with the enterprise level subscriptions, at least the standard. And then the premium one gets you some additional features like those data classifications and the active threat monitoring. So I can't say the AI, the bots that go around and help you identify potential security risks. It's also the annoyance because that's what controls SSO, which feels like a basic feature, but that's what we're stuck with. And it is a separate SKU, a separate app. So you pay for it by the person in your organization. Can we have automation for Atlassian Guard? It sounds like what you're asking, Tushar, is like, say I'm terminated in Workday, my HR system, have that shut down Guard. If that's the case, it would depend on your IDP and how that's set up. Because once we turn this on and once we synchronize with an identity provider, we're looking at that identity provider to tell us who is active. So it's not about disabling them in Guard, it's about disabling them over in Okta or OneLogin or whatever we're using. As always, I need y'all's help. Again, quickest way you can help me is just hit that like button, and I'll say that a lot. I'm going to get real tired of saying it. But I also need your feedback. I'm going to drop a Google form link just with any thoughts you have on the sessions. Anything you want to share I could be doing better or differently, etc. Just drop it in there, and I'll do my best to adjust. That's why I'm using the Q&A thing in YouTube now, just as another way to interact. And looking for other ways to improve and give you all a better experience. Another way you can support me is I've started my own learning platform. This is the first course. It's kind of a soft launch. This is the ACA 910. So this is an hour and a half of content on earning the ACA 910, and this also includes an exam voucher to that certification exam. So definitely check this out. Feel free to share it with your teams. But this to me is everything I wish I had known when I started using Jira Service Management. And it includes that exam voucher. So you get an attempt at the exam and hopefully you'll pass because I've set you up for success. I'll drop a link in here as well. And then what's next? Our next session is next Monday, the 11th, and I got that date right. Same date, same time. But please go study on your own. Go through that learning, Atlassian learning. Get hands-on with Guard if you've got it. Go get a free trial of it. But really dig in and understand on your own what's going on with it. Also review this recording. As I mentioned, it'll be saved on YouTube probably forever, until long after I'm gone, which is kind of terrifying to think about. But check out the other sessions as well. Again, the certification is not just around Guard, it's around all of being a cloud org admin. So please review that and then talk to other folks. Jump into Discord and start asking people what it's like to use Guard or what their biggest annoyance is. Jump into the Atlassian community and start poking around. But the more exposure you can get to more ideas and ways of using it, the stronger, better, faster, smarter you're going to be. I'm also always available, robert@heen.tech. And check out my website, heen.tech, for more info. I do want to thank you all for joining me. And Guard for me was a new thing. Thank you, Tushar. I appreciate your feedback. And it's something that especially at bigger orgs you're going to see and bump into quite a bit. So it is an important aspect of being a cloud org admin. Last request, if you could just hit that like button or check out my course. Easiest ways to support me or become a channel member. But again, thank you all for learning with me. I'll see you next Monday or tomorrow morning for Jira Service Management for complete beginners. Otherwise, I'll see you in Discord and have a great week, folks. I'll leave the chat open for a little bit. All right, folks. Have a great week, and I hope to see you soon.